In today's message, Pastor Jamal will be talking about negative thoughts and negative emotions. That's something that we all deal with. It's something that we all have to face at one point in time in our lives. So listen to this brief message and learn how you can start to unblock that and how you can have better control and authority on your own life.
So today we want to talk about negative thoughts or negative emotions, and specifically the logic in negative emotions. Logic is a pathway of, some might say it's a least resistance pathway. We have a logical way that we go about getting education. We have a logical way that we do our jobs, that we just function in the world. So it's compatible with the system that's built that has produced results, right? But logic is reasonable, but it's not the truth. So what do I mean? Again, it's reasonable because it fits the system. It fits the standard of whatever it is that we're doing or whatever system that we're using. It fits the standard of the way that we've gotten results. And I think that's pretty evident. But it's not truth, because truth is always outside of the normal perception. You know, that's why we pray and we meditate and we consult and we seek God, because God always has the perception, the vantage point that we don't have, able to see all sides. So when we are stuck or when we can't see or when we don't know which direction to go, you know, we consult God, right? At least that's what we should do. So I wanted just to add that in there before we get to talking specifically about the logic in negative emotions or negative thoughts, or what we call negative thoughts. But first, what is a negative thought or a negative emotion? Let's just say with thoughts. A negative thought is simply something that contradicts the way that God would have a situation handled. And God is very significant. The spiritual realm is very significant, because if you believe it, first off, then, you know, the Bible tells us that it's through the invisible that the visible was made. So the real reality rests in the unseen world. It can't be seen like we see each other now. It's not physical. So the unseen creates the seen. That's what God says, or at least the Bible. So negative thoughts are labeled that way because they contradict something that is intuitively present and available and there at all times. But just because it doesn't match the physical system of how you're used to living your life, it's uncomfortable to kind of go with first. So again, why do we have negative emotions or negative thoughts? And specifically around the areas in your life that you're really, really concerned about. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your spirituality, maybe it's your job, whatever it is that really concerns you the most. Why is it that we have, well, again, what we call negative emotions or negative thoughts around it? When you start to operate in the spiritual realm, when you start to learn how to be who you are, be the vessel of God, this spiritual thing, then you start to operate in different parameters than what you're used to operating in. So let's say you have spent most of your life walking this particular direction. On this pathway, you have encountered a lot of things that have made impressions in you. Maybe they're negative, maybe they're positive. When I say negative, I mean you could do without experiencing that thing, anymore. So that's another way to say negative. But maybe it's positive, maybe it's negative, maybe it's uncomfortable. Whatever it is, your body has been used to you, your brain, all of this awesomeness that you are, has been used to living this life this particular way. Now, when you invite God or you surrender to the guidance of God, to all of the possibilities that God is leading you towards, then it begins to be uncomfortable because the body, the subconscious, the mind, all of these things are now like, okay, what's going on here? None of this looks familiar at all. And I think we're in danger. So because your body is not used to this particular pathway, it starts to bring up all of these different things. They start with thoughts. And when you invest in the thoughts, when you lean into them more, then they pull with it more emotion. So let's just say your child is starting to act out in a particular way that you're not used to. And instead of allowing surrender to guide you into the place that's more profitable for not only you, but your child, you start to like, oh no, this can't happen. So you start to investigate the old nature, the old ways of doing things, or the old thoughts that come up. They kind of steer you into the direction of where is most familiar. And maybe what's most familiar is panic. Maybe what's most familiar is worry, it's doubt. It's listening to all of the things that have been around you that have told you, okay, this is a sign that your child is getting ready to be in danger, that they're getting ready to go down the wrong pathway. And, it's going to cause everybody a lot of drama, but what if that's not it at all? What if it's only God's way of getting you to release your hand off of a situation that only can be dealt with through the power of surrender, through the power of trust? But again, it's hard for us to trust when these emotions and when these thoughts come up because we're not familiar with God's way of doing things. And again, they're there to save you. And not to really save you in a good way, but they're trying to keep you out of danger. You heard the thing fight or flight. So there was a time when, the whole purpose of our being here was just to survive from all of the elements. So we've developed these things that keep us safe. Now, what's happened is as we progressed in our evolution, in our understanding, then the things that normally would have destroyed us, we kind of got a good control over for the most part. But what we don't have a good control over, a good understanding of, is the thoughts, and which yield or which make way for those emotions that seem to be hard or to be negative or to be traumatic. But once we get a grasp on all that's going on right now, when you have a negative thought is just contrary to God's plan. So God gives you a directive, God gives you a commission, and as you go with it, it starts to yield, or other things start to come in, and those other things are those unfamiliar places to your regular existence that's saying, no, I can't deal with this. This isn't right. You're headed into a danger zone. So once we get a good grasp on what it is that is happening when we feel a negative emotion or a negative thought, and we see it for what it truly is, then we take the power over it. And that's very key, and it's very critical to understand, because if you never know what's happening or why it's happening, then you will always be a slave to it and to the possibility of it being drastically what it is. And that's just a fact. Why do you think God set it up this way? Why is it set up to get a directive from God, and then all of a sudden something shows itself that is contrary to that directive? It happened to Adam and Eve. They had a specific commission and they were used to living life this way, but then something else comes in and it disrupts their way of existence. But instead of getting back on track, they totally went full force, head deep inside of this thing, this enemy, this serpent, whatever you want to call it. And as a result, we have to learn how to get back on track, to get back to functioning to who we truly are and who we were always meant to be. So why did God set it up this way? It's simply like this. If you absolutely positively knew and believed that God told you something, There was no shadow of a doubt. There was no reference of differences or obstacles or unbelief or something else happening. And you absolutely knew it was God. Most of us would believe it. There would be no need to investigate anything, because if God just showed up right here, just stood right here and said, hey, go give me some ice cream. hey, I'm going to get some ice cream. You know what I mean? There's no shadow of a doubt, because there's nothing in my person that's denying this fact that's right before me. Just as we stand here in these lights and this place, there's not a shadow of a doubt in my mind that I'm here. And so if I believed that God was the same way in whatever direction that God was giving me, then there would be no doubt. There would be no doubt. But there's a problem with that. And the problem is, if there's no doubt, if there's no contrast, no contradiction, if there's no other thing to notice, then how would we be able to exercise our free will or our trust in God? There has to be an opposite in order for us to grow, to transcend, to move from glory to glory. So God, in all of God's brilliance, knows that we have to move from where we are to where we're going, and then from where we are then to the next point, and then to the next point, because we're always moving forward. We're always going from glory to glory. But when we are met with the opposition of negative thoughts and negative emotions, then it stops us in our tracks, and we start to second guess our previous evident commission. Because you know what I mean? How many times have you knew God said something to you and you felt it and you were so excited about it, only to have 20 minutes later, you backed out and you're back worrying and whatever it is. But what was that initial feeling? Why was it so strong? Why was it so passionate? Because there was no obstacle, there was no opposition in your belief, in your hearing, in your seeing. But then here comes the thing, which again is understandable. It's reasonable, because it's trying to save you from something that's unfamiliar. But the problem with unfamiliar is it's not truth. It's reasonable, but it's not truth. And the truth is, you were made to move higher and higher and higher and create out of nothing something beautiful, only to create again and again and again through your moving from insight, from God's intuition, into doubt, back into God's intuition, into belief, and forward and forward and forward. That's where we create. We create possibility from our belief in possibility, but not on the other side. Yeah, it's possible to say, I'm weak, I'm no good, I'm this and that, you know what I mean? And then lean into that to the point where that's who you become. But isn't that amazing in itself when you realize that, wow, God set this thing up. So no matter what it is I believe, let it be unto you according to how you believe. There's no gray area there. That's just what it is. So if we learned how to operate in the wisdom of belief and the wisdom of creation, to the fact that we start to embody that thing and it becomes everything that we've desired for it to be, then that's the place that we're supposed to live. And I will say, knowing this, knowing that there's a possibility, there's always a possibility, there's always a gray area, it does make it hard to trust God. But it's only hard because you don't understand the system that was built, the law of the thing. So I'm presenting to you a law, and the law is there's nothing wrong. There's no negative thoughts. There's no negative emotions. All those things is your body reacting to something that is unfamiliar with. But you have to learn how to go beyond your body, because you're not your body. And you go beyond your body to the point where you believe God and you move forward in the desires that God has placed in your heart so they can be birthed. They can be birthed. That's a serious thing, man. We struggle so much with emotions. And I will say this, the thing about yielding to negative thoughts. And again, the negative thought is the thought that is contradictory or contrary to the place that God is leading you, because it's unfamiliar to it. But when we yield to those negative things, the longer you yield to it, then what starts to arise is the emotion that comes with it. So remember when you were afraid that your child was in danger, or that you was in danger, or that something awful was going to happen, or you're sick. Remember how that feels. Those are impressions that can be brought up at will by the ego, by the body, by the subconscious, which none of it's your enemy. But it could seem like it's your enemy, because if it goes against the direction that God is sending you, then it's like an enemy. You know, all of these stories, all of these examples, all of these symbolic things that we read about in sacred scripture, man, they're symbolic. They're there for a reason. They're not meant to scare you or anything like that, but they're meant to point you to a truth that is powerful and that is profound and that you must grasp. You got to grasp it. Nothing's wrong. There is no enemy. There is no negative thoughts or emotions in the way that we've learned them to be or that we've labeled them. All that there is two forces, really one force, because God is the only power that there is. But since we are made in the image of God, we have the ability to create these things that seem like they're in opposition. That's just being fearfully and wonderfully made. But when we don't understand how to work it, then we create all of this type of chaos, you know. But it is wonderful when you realize who and what you really are, and there is really no problems. We just have to learn how to move in this realm, how to operate in the way that we were made to operate, so that the creators that we are, the co-creators that we are, can function absolutely how we were made to. Hope that made sense. We're going to step right over into the coaching room where LaShondra is going to give you some things to think about and some strategies to kind of learn how to start to release the negative labels that we give ourselves, that we give our thoughts, that we give our feelings. You know, we try to run from these feelings so much instead of being able to see them for what they are and why they're there. So she's going to give you some help on how to not only deal with that, but things that you could do to fortify the truth of who you really are, which is spirit. And when you really understand it and you're able to operate in this strength, then you start to create worlds, man. Your life is going to be so much better. It's going to feel so much more whole, in connection with God, in connection of what you really are, in connection with God. Kind of said that twice, but you understand. Stay tuned.
So first, I want to start this coaching room by telling you to go back, rewatch that video, and really take in everything that was said to you, everything that was explained to you, and pick up those things that you know you need to apply to your own life. Sometimes we have to rewatch things and re-listen to something to gain the full perspective that God is trying to get us to see from that message. So right now, I want you to pause this, rewatch that, and then come back to the coaching room. There's such thing as man's logic versus God's perspective or God's reasoning upon a thing. And that's just one of the things that was discussed in today's message. And it's something that's so important, and God knows I'm so grateful to be able to understand what's the difference of that and how can I start to more effectively navigate my life, because that's the whole purpose, right? That's one of the things that we all want to do. We want to have better control, better understanding of how we are and how we are created to move. So understanding that there's a difference between our logic and God's perspective is one way to start to do that. It's very important for you to understand that negative thoughts and or negative emotions are not on the same frequency as your desired result. Listen to that. Think about it. Now, we all have desired results, the things that we want to see happen in our lives. But if we're so focused on the negative, and sometimes focusing on the negative is simply us not being aware enough to stop those negative thoughts or emotions, then we're not going to get to the desired results. From firsthand experience, it's easy. So, Lord, so easy, too easy sometimes to get caught up in the emotional tornado that we all experience. There's, these emotions that we have, and next thing we know, the tornado came and it has picked us up, and now we're in that whirlwind. We're right there in it with those negative emotions. We're sitting there with those negative thoughts and negative emotions versus knowing how to slow it down, knowing how to stop it, and knowing where you can land, which where you want to land is right in God's reality, which is one of the things that the pastor said today, is that there's such thing as God's reality versus what we think is reality. And that's where we want to be, in God's reality, because that's where all truth is, and that is the most truthful place from everything else, from where everything else comes from where it's created and from where it's developed, and from where we have our best position to start to live our very best life. So how do you start to break free from that negative space? How do you start to come back down from that tornado? And how do you start to really see your life from this space that God has created for you to live from? One of those ways that you can start to do that is recognize those emotions. There's 3 simple steps, and I'll just say it: to recognize, to acknowledge, and to release. Those things, even in that order, will help you to start to become more aware of your emotions, more aware of your thoughts. And so then you can acknowledge it, and then you can release it so that you can be at a better, more thoughtful place and space within your life. There was another part in the message where Pastor Jamal was talking about our emotions. Most of the time they're trying to protect us. That's what they're really trying to do. But we know that God has this fuller perspective, and when we can get to that place and we can start to break free from the negative cycle of emotions and thoughts, then we can be at that honestly the best place, the place that truly is secure, and that place that truly is safe, which is from the mind of God. And from that mind of God, then everything else can be created that we truly desire in life. So when you can start to break free from the cycle of negative thoughts and negative emotions, because let's all be very, very honest with ourselves, because honesty is the only way that we can really start to move forward. And that's what I want you to really gain here through the coaching room, that you have to start to be honest with yourself. Take an honest look at your thoughts, take an honest look at your emotions, and see where you can improve upon. And so when we're really honest with ourselves, we see that we live from that place of negativity a lot of the time. Don't get too hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up with it. And that's the other thing. Don't replace a negative thought with another negative thought. So meaning, if you notice that your thoughts are more on the negative side, so again, just meaning that it's contrary to God's plan and to God's thoughts, then don't start to beat yourself up and say, oh, I'm never going to get anywhere in life, and oh, I'm so negative, how can I make it, and God don't really love me because I'm so negative, or I'm going to create more negativity. Like, you start to get into this panic mode. That's not going to help, first of all, and that's not the most beneficial place that God has created for you to stand in and to stand your ground upon. So I want to tell you to start to replace those thoughts with more positive thoughts. The positive thoughts, they can be scripture. If you have a few scriptures that you love that help to lift you up, then do that. They can be replacing your thought with another positive quote. The point is that you want to start to shift directions and the momentum that negativity is already going in. When you start to do that, now you can gain more positive momentum in the direction in which you want your life to take. And even, yes, sometimes it has to be a moment by moment thing. So don't get too worried and don't get too caught up if you feel like it's taking too long, or if you feel like, well, I'm trying to replace these negative thoughts and more negative thoughts keep coming. It's okay. That's normal too. But just continue to work at it and allow the work that you're doing, allow it to work, allow it to happen for you. Sometimes we get so worried about the time frame and we want it to happen just like that we don't realize that sometimes it takes a minute to slow it down. So that's the next portion. I want you to learn how to slow down that negative momentum. And the best way that you can do that is, like I said, by replacing it with another thought. But sometimes it's even hard to do that. Sometimes you have to switch gears and switch directions all the way. So that means, okay, I'm going to go watch a movie, or I'm going to go listen to music, or I'm going to take a walk. That means now you've cut it off completely, and you're not so focused on trying to change the thought versus just slowing it down and moving on with your life. And the last thing that you can do to break free from that negative momentum is just by simply allowing it to pass through. When you can become an observer of your thoughts and not an active participant of it, then now you're allowing that negative thought, the negative emotion to just pass through. You're not so worried about trying to change it, and you can just let it pass through. It's that simple. Sometimes, again, we get too focused on the work aspect instead of the belief aspect. And we have to continue to depend even on God to help us to do these things. We really can't do it ourselves, but thank God for his spirit that's within us and that's all around us, that's constantly guiding us and giving us that reinforcement that we need to live our very best life. And one of the last things that I want to leave you with is, I want you to start to notice the unfamiliar that is showing up in your life. Now, sometimes we take the unfamiliar to mean that it's bad. No, most times the unfamiliar that's trying to show up is packed full of growth, of blessings, of favor, and all of your dreams coming true. But what tries to show up is the fear and that negative momentum that will try to overshadow the unfamiliar because it's unfamiliar and because it's uncomfortable for you. But all you have to do is trust what God is showing you, learn to believe in that, and learn to rest in that. Remember, none of these things are done by your effort alone. All it takes is your willingness to trust the Spirit, and not only your willingness, but your ability to believe what God is telling you. That's instilled within you. It's not something that you have to work or try to gain. It's already there. Now you're just giving yourself permission to access that place that you need to continue to move forward in your life and to create everything that God has in store for you.